Welcome to Tracks to Success, brought to you by Presentation Partners. This is the podcast that brings you inspiring people and their inspiring stories. How did they find their way to the top, and how can their path help you do the same? Here's your host, network broadcaster, executive, and entrepreneur, Kraig Kann.
Right now on Tracks to Success, you'll hear from one of the most dynamic and engaging women in the business world today. She's a former Division I college athlete who carved a niche in the world of professional sports as one of the first and most successful female agents. She's now flourishing as an entrepreneur and the CEO of her own expanding company. She's written multiple books. She hosts her own podcast, and she's traveling the world as a sought-after motivational keynote speaker. Once labeled the female Jerry Maguire, she's now busier than ever representing herself. She's known as an innovative thinker and a master storyteller, owning the stage and grabbing the attention of audiences around the world. Her name is Molly Fletcher. Her inspiring story and this edition of Tracks to Success starts now. All right, Molly, this is a total thrill to have you. And obviously, we go back a ways. My toughest challenge in this interview is that we could talk about a million things, but we've only got so much time, right? I mean, we only have so much time. So I want to start with the now. You're a keynote speaker, you're an author, you're a CEO of a business designed to help people become their best self, you're a mother. It's not what you always did. The mother's been there for a while, but you're probably busier now than ever.
Sure. Oh, sure. Well, yeah, no, you're sweet. I mean, well, for 20 years almost, I was a sports agent and transitioned to the world that I live in now. And I'm probably as busy as I was then, but I control my time a little bit more than I did as an agent. As an agent, as you know, from the work that you did, and I had the pleasure of representing you, it was, you're reacting a lot to when we had almost 300 athletes and coaches who are waking up every day doing what they do, and which naturally means that you've got, people that are getting hired and fired, and athletes are getting released, and coaches that are looking at other jobs and trades and injuries. And so it was reacting at some level. I mean, as much as you can be proactive, you do at some level react. But yeah, now, so I speak and write and it's just an honor and a pleasure. But certainly my number one priority is being a wife and a mother to three teenage daughters and my wonderful husband, Fred. So it's fun.
Yeah, I bet it is. And the 3 teenage daughters, oh my. I've got that as well. I don't have 3, but I understand where you're going. So we're going to talk a lot more about the agent stuff in just a bit, and the keynote speaking and the books and all of that. So more on those topics as we move along. But I need to give our listeners some history on you. Let's take us back. Where was home as a kid? And the funny part of this is, if I was going to interview your parents, like, would they have seen all this coming? Were you that kind of a kid?
Well, I don't know what all this coming means, but my parents are incredible people, and I'm so grateful they're both still alive, 78 and 82. And I grew up in East Lansing, Michigan, with twin brothers that were 5 years older than me, who treated me a whole lot more like a little brother than a little sister. And they were awesome and we are a very close family. I talk to my parents and my brothers actually every day. I'm 48 years old. Probably people think, well, that's pretty weird. No. But we're very close. So I grew up in a home where, there was just a ton of love. But my parents were the kind of people that, sort of always taught us. My father was a pharmaceutical sales rep who was a sales guy, right, at the core. And my mom was a teacher. So I think all of that has rolled up into the way I show up today. And I'm so grateful for the foundation that we had, both from the things I learned around the dinner table, but also just the love that existed in our home. And But when I graduated, I played tennis at Michigan State, where I had the opportunity. I grew up in East Lansing, and then I was such a big girl, right? I went 2 miles away.
Yeah, I was just going to say, why? Why did you not
So
venture
risky, right?
off?
Because honestly, I was okay coming out of high school at tennis, but I started when I was like 14 playing tennis, so that was pretty late.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved it, and when I kind of got going with tennis, I really went after it pretty quick and pretty hard. But I wasn't in a position to really play at a D1 level at a ton of schools. And Michigan State, fortunately, the coach knew me because I was local,
Mm-hmm.
knew my coach, and knew that I was really continuing to get better and that I had a lot more in me. And she bet on me, right? I was a recruited walk-on. And for that, I'm so grateful. And then I came in and there was some injuries, and I found myself playing one doubles and singles out of the gates as a freshman, and, earned a scholarship by my sophomore year. And, it was captain the team, and it was special, but it was a blessing. I am so close to my mom and dad, and truth be told, I'm not sure I was ready to go too far away. So it was really a blessing to be able to be a student athlete right there. And my parents came to every match and all that.
That's real cool. Did your brothers push you around a little bit, or did they toughen you up?
Dude, they toughened me up. I mean, they were both pilots, and our pilots. One flew F-14s and F-18s, and the other flew C-130s. They were both military guys and now fly for the airlines. But they, it was kind of a situation where, like, if they were all wrestling, my dad and my brothers, and I decided to jump in because I thought I could hang. It was sort of a thing where, look, if you step into this madness, you don't go crying after to me because you chose to step in. And so there were so many moments like that in life, right, that are such powerful metaphors for life today, right? So they were things, like I've said before publicly, like I would come home with an A-, and I was an okay student, but I'd come home with an A-, and I'd be really pumped because I got an A-, and only 3 kids got an A, and everybody else got, a B or a C. And, my mom, with like love and kindness, would sort of look at me with real authentic curiosity and say, well, what do you think those people that got an A did?
Oh, God.
And I'm super pumped I got an A-. But so it was always this undercurrent of, just there's always a way to kind of get better. And, but again, with like love and kindness, it wasn't,
sure.
It was just a curiosity, and it was a powerful thing. So, I give them a lot of credit, and they say you shouldn't give me so much credit, but I do, because they're incredible people.
What'd you major in at Michigan State? Well, and was it tied to anything about being an agent?
No, Kraig, I was a communication arts, major. And I think that was candidly because that's what all the student athletes majored in when I was a student athlete. Right. And the truth is, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I really did not know. And that's why, when my daughters, they're 16 and 17 now, and they'll, when people sort of try to put pressure on kids now to feel like you got to know. And, I think it's okay not to know. I mean, I had no idea, but what I was really curious, and I always wanted to learn and understand how, all the different ways in the world that you can make money and make a living and give back and contribute and all those things. And it provided a good foundation for sure, into the world that I went but as I'm sure you say in the work that you've done, I wish I had a psychology minor, because as a sports agent, really that,
oh yeah,
that's really what I tell young kids. They sort of joke. I joke with them and say, major, maybe business, but minor in psychology, man, because that's what it is.
Sure.
That's what it is.
No, I mean, I look back at broadcasting as a major, and I'm like, okay, that's all great, but it's such a narrow focus, and there's so many other things in life that we end up doing and needing. You go all the way back to like high school, and you're like, why didn't they give me this class? Or when you take electives in college, there's so many now that they should force upon kids that would help them later in life. No
question. Oh, no question. I mean, I wish I would have taken more business and accounting and things of that nature, but again, like all of us in life and in business, we all have gaps, and I certainly have plenty. And, you just try to hire people and put people around you that close those gaps and bring strength to your weaknesses. And that's, that's what you try to do.
First job out of school, what was it? And how did this path to being an agent happen?
Yeah. So I graduated and I moved down to Atlanta. And long story short, I negotiated a deal to live in an apartment complex in exchange for my rent by teaching tennis. It's a super long story. It's on YouTube. It's ever. But it was, I only had about $2,000 when I got down to Atlanta because I wanted to move to Atlanta because there was, the Super Bowl, the Olympics, a couple of pro teams, college teams. And I knew I wanted to be in sports by the time I graduated, but I didn't really know what that meant or what that even really looked like. But I knew that was an area that I had a lot of interest in. And so, when I was able to teach tennis for my rent, it gave that $2,000 an opportunity to last a little bit longer. And so long story short, I started networking, and I always tell young kids and people really in general, right? Like, when you ask for a job, you get advice. When you ask for advice, you end up with a job. And so my strategy was I'm going to ask as many people as I can for advice and try to get 15 minutes with a whole bunch of people. And I got an opportunity. And I used to say on my resume, I was the liaison between, the NFL commissioner, the Super Bowl host committee, volunteers, transportation. But what I I answered the phone at Super Bowl 28. So it was Super Bowl 28. This is Molly all day long, every day. And that was my first job. I mean, I answered the phones, but I worked for this woman, and I'd always believed that in tough things there's always good stuff. And I worked for this woman that was pretty difficult, and she didn't take, I would put people on hold and she wouldn't pick them up. And they would get mad at me because but she would just sort of put all these incredible, Paul Tagliabue, right? Like a commissioner of the NFL. She would put, the CMO of Coke, the CMO of Home Depot, the CMO of Delta. She would put these people on hold. And so fast forward, though, they would come up into the office too, and they would see this sort of shenanigan that was happening that I was trying to navigate. And well, I was waiting. I got to know these incredible leaders, and I thought, if I can get them to like and respect me enough, maybe they'll help me or they'll hire me. Mm-hmm. And so I did that for about 6 months, and then I continued to navigate and network with often kind of these incredible people that were kind to me when I was young and early on. And then I found myself with an opportunity at a small sports agency. We had about 4 clients when I came in, and my role was to go get endorsement and appearance deals for the athletes and coaches that we had. And I did that for about a month. And then I thought, God, how are we going to grow, right? Like, how are we going to get more talent? Because that's really where the opportunity is if you can get more athletes under management, you can negotiate their primary deals. And that's where the firm can and the agency can grow. And so I went into the CEO and said, God, what's our growth plan? And he said, referrals. He said, it's all referrals. And at the time it was Chuck Daly referred Mike Fratello, and Fratello referred Lenny Wilkins, and he's walking me. I said, well, what if we got more aggressive? And of course I was probably standing there in a skirt, and he's thinking, well, how does that work? Right? Like, you didn't coach in the NBA and you didn't play big league baseball. And I put a business plan together, and fortunately he blessed it. And I, started recruiting, initially baseball players that were coming out in the draft, guys that were coming out of Georgia Tech and Georgia that were right in my backyard. And, kind of went down there, just trying to outwork everybody, leaning on the fence every day, and signed some guys that year and the next year. And, anyway, I'm talking too much, and then it evolved from there.
Well, I tell kids all the time when it comes to the networking idea, don't treat your conversations like you're looking for something. Treat them as a research project, right? Ask questions, sure. Figure out how, you can find a way in that you'll help them, and don't worry about them helping you. And I think that helps a lot of people to kind of come up with a proper focus. Let's talk about you as the agent, okay? And I'm going to give you the labels that people say about you. Number one, which I know you've heard this, you've seen it, it's printed. It's pretty cool. The female Jerry Maguire, all right? We all know the show me the money and all that stuff. Do you like that? Does that rub you the wrong way, the right way? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's funny. People ask me that. I don't overthink it, right? Like, to me, it's just a quick way for people to say, "Oh, I get what she did," right? Like, I get it. Like, I don't overthink it. I mean, some people think, "Well, gosh, is that offensive or whatever? Or do you like it? Whatever." it's a way to contextualize the work that I did for people pretty quickly. And,
Okay.
but I tell you, when you feel old is when you're sitting there with a 22-year-old and they're
They
like, now,
don't
what
know
was
the
the
movie.
movie Jerry Maguire? And I'm like, oh man, this is not good.
Yeah.
So yeah, for our age group, it works.
Not terrible. People also say you're a trailblazer. Now, I like this one. For women in the sports agent world, and maybe beyond that, Molly, what does that mean to you?
Well, I'm grateful for that. I mean, I've had the opportunity to try to influence a lot of young women over the years, and for that, it's wonderful. I mean, I think whenever we find ourselves with whatever the world has deemed to be, a bit of a platform, the thing that's most important in that, in my opinion, is to use that to give back. And so to be able to influence and support, young guys and girls, but young people who want to navigate and lean into the space, or women in general, right, that are dealing with different things. I mean, I speak a lot, and oftentimes, if I spoke to Lowe's, to all their women, or to a technology company, to all their women, where there's not a lot of men. And so when I can find myself, whether it's with young and old women, supporting them, being sometimes the only woman in the room, and telling them what I found it worked, and sharing mistakes that I made, but certainly things that worked, and in hopes that it helps them, to me, that's the gift, and sort of any reference to sort of being a trailblazer.
Yeah, you've represented a lot of people. My guess is that, like me, and you kind of mentioned this already, there's so much stress and anxiety that goes with athletes or broadcasters giving their careers, right? Putting their career in the hands of somebody else, an agent
Sure.
like yourself. How did you manage that?
Well, you're right. I mean, and I took it very, very seriously, because these guys and gals that we work with have oftentimes, if it's an athlete particularly, such a short window of time to do something really special, to make and contribute and do something that they've oftentimes maybe worked 10, 15 years to sort of get to this
Yeah.
place that only has so much time to probably do it. Now, Tom Brady is unique and special, and you see some of these guys that stay in this space for a long time. But when you look at the data and the stats, I mean, the average length of a baseball guy or an NFL guy, I mean, it's not very long at all. And so to me, it was about taking that window of time incredibly seriously, and recognizing how unique it is, and treating that athlete or coach or broadcaster as a CEO. And they are now running a business that has a clock ticking on it every single moment. And to ensure that you maximize every opportunity inside of that window of time for them, but also prepare them for later. I mean, I think an agent's responsibility isn't just the right now, but the later, and particularly, for athletes, because it will end. And I always used to tell my guys, look, man, when that jersey isn't on your back anymore, when you're not making 10, 15, $20 million a year, everybody doesn't take your call like they do now.
Yeah.
And it changes. And I know you don't think it will ever change, because you live in this world where you have hundreds of thousands of dollars coming in every other week. That is not normal. That is incredibly unique. And we have to be incredibly diligent and responsible about it. So I took it in incredibly seriously, and tried to ensure that I gave them all I got. Inside of that window of time. That was imperative.
Give us one of your clients that stands out, that you use in your talks, and you respect so much, and it was a pleasure and all that. I know you have a bunch, and we could look all that up, but is there one that stands out to you that influenced you?
Yeah, I mean, boy, it's tough to pick one, to be honest. I mean, I'm so grateful, because we always represented really good people who happened to, throw a baseball 100 miles an hour, right? Or who happened to win a lot of basketball games, right? Or who happened to be incredible on TV. But they were first good people, and that was always a number one priority for me, because you're working 24/7. And so when you look down and see that name on your phone, you want to like them. And so that was important. But I would say, John Stoltz was a right-handed pitcher for the Atlanta Braves. And, John, I have so much respect for the way that he did what he did, the way he went about his career, his role, his platform. And it's funny, because I saw all the little moments in these guys' lives and gals' lives. I mean, and the world just saw the big moments. The world would just see John step out on the mound in Game 7 and, throw hard, sit guys down, and win Game 7 of, that's what the world saw.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw, the drive to the ballpark when he would call me because he had a hangnail in his thumb and he couldn't grip his curveball like he wanted to, and or the hamstring that he couldn't tell the trainer about because they thought he'd pull him from his next start. I mean, I saw all the little moments and the grind and the competitiveness that he had, and the personal stuff that he was navigating around in his own life. And I would hear, the challenges in his personal life, and then I would watch him step out on a mound and, throw 80 or 90 pitches, and I thought the world thinks he's incredible, and they don't even know everything.
Yeah.
And he's even more incredible than you think, because he is an incredible competitor, but he's a great, human being. He's a great husband. He's a great dad. He's a guy that shows up at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta on Christmas Day and doesn't want anyone to know about it.
Yeah,
He's the guy that's packing turkeys on Thanksgiving and doesn't want anyone to know about it. And that is cool, So and Tom Izzo was it's probably no coincidence they're both Michigan guys, but Tom is a guy that I respect because he's not changed. He's had a lot of success, but he's still
same guy.
This guy from Iron Mountain, Michigan, who, I was on the phone with him the other day and he was laughing. He said, Mal, I was out cleaning out my garage and some guy drove by and said, "You do that?" He was like, "Well, do you clean out your garage?" And the guy goes, "Well, yeah." And he goes, "Well, then why can't I clean out mine?" It's like, just because I, do X or Y. And so I guess the guys that I appreciated and loved the most were, and the girls were the ones that were authentic,
yeah.
and that used their platform for good. And recognized that it was so much more than about, baseball or coaching. It's about creating, a team or advancing young men into the world. That's what it's about.
So why'd you get out? Why'd you stop being an agent?
Yeah. So we had, so fast forward, it was 18 years almost. And I had about 300 athletes, coaches, a team of agents that served our clients. And so I've always been fascinated with peak performance. And, and that was one of the things I loved the most about it was I was around these, top 1% people from a performance perspective. And so I started to see a common denominator in peak performers, whether it was, the things that made Doc Rivers great was the same things that made a broadcaster great, or Tom Izzo, or, Ernie Johnson Jr. And I started to see that, and I thought, this can help people. That this behavior and this mindset that I'm seeing with all of these different kind of performers, if you will, it can help people. And I thought, I'm going to write a book about it. And so I wrote a book and I pushed it out into the market, and it did pretty well. And so then companies started saying, "Hey, Molly, will you come and talk about your book?" So, a lot of financial companies were coming to me to talk to their advisors. And so I started speaking about the book, and then I found myself at the back of the room, there would be other people that would see it, and then they would say, "Hey, will you come and do our national sales conference, or will you come and do our, sales kickoff in January? Or will you come and do?" And so I was like, "Well, yes, because I felt like, man, this is really cool. This is really helping people a lot." And I was getting feedback that it was helping people, and I was getting emails and, all that. And I thought, man, this is really cool. I feel like I've been blessed with this platform that now can help people, which was cool. And so, so then I found myself at a place where I was taking vacation days to go speak. And, I would land, I remember once I landed in Pittsburgh, and Smoltz called me and he was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Hey man, I just landed in Pittsburgh." He was like, "Oh, who you seeing?" And I'll never forget that moment. And I was like, "Actually, man, I'm speaking to a group of, salespeople from Medtronic or something." And he was like, "Oh, really? Huh?" And I felt in that moment very unauthentic. And I was like, I can't do both of these things at the same time for very long. I'm going to have to make a decision here.
Right,
This is
right.
These two worlds are, and at the time my girls were getting older, I was on the phone 24/7, and I was feeling this pull, and I trusted myself, and I believed that I could make this all go and work. And so I jumped, right, which was probably, crazy. I mean, at the time, because I had, I don't know, 10 keynotes on the books for 10% of what I was making, and an awesome team of clients and agents. And But I got to be honest. I mean, it was the best decision I ever made. I actually wish I would have done it like a year or so sooner than I did it. And, now I speak about 50 times a year. I've gotten, 5 books out and feel like it's a message that's transferring and helping business people do what they do, maybe just a little bit better, a little bit differently, with a little bit different perspective. And, using sports as that metaphor is powerful. So,
Yeah.
So it wasn't like this grand plan. I wish I could say that, but like a lot of our lives and like a lot of our work, I think it's like Arthur Blank, who owns the Falcons, told me once. He said, Molly, if you listen to your heart and you close a gap in the market and serve people, you're probably going to make it. You're probably going to do all right. And that was really kind of what happened.
Yeah.
So it's been a fun journey.
Molly Fletcher is our guest on this edition of Tracks to Success. Tracks to Success is brought to you by Presentation Partners, visual storytellers passionate about connecting presenters with their audience. All right, you just talked about how scary it is to kind of venture off and do your own thing. And you mentioned the books, so you're way ahead of me on all this stuff. 5 of them, as you mentioned. Interestingly, each kind of fits nicely under the topic of this podcast, Tracks to Success. You got one, your dream job game plan. Another one, the business of being the best. The third one, 5 best tools to find your dream career. So let's address that group, because each of those kind of empowers people, as I see it, and I'm sure you too, to find their personal career happiness, right? Do you find in the people that you talk with, Molly, that most people are feeling a little bit stuck and unhappy in their career?
No, yeah. I mean, it's staggering data out there around that, right? And you work a lot in your life, right? And so part of the impetus around these books is to try to help people have the courage to make a change if that's what they need to do, but more importantly, how do you recognize that what we do is a really big part of the lives that we live, and we work a lot. I mean, we work 82,000 hours. I think I did the math once in our lives, right? Like, it takes me 15 minutes to empty the dishwasher, and I got to tell you, I hate it, right?
Yeah,
So,
well, most do.
like, yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to do anything for 82,000 hours that I don't love. And, this life thing is not a dress rehearsal, right? I mean, we don't get to do it twice. So
Yeah.
I am, and all of these books, I hope help people recognize that we don't get to do this again. And, having the courage to make a change if they need to make a change, to discover the gaps in their lives or in the lives of the people that they do want to serve and support. And, one of my latest books, The Energy Clock, helps people get really clear on what gives you energy and what drains your energy, and how can you wrap the life that you live around the things that give you energy. Because if we have energy, we can give that energy to the people in our lives that matter most, both personally and professionally. And so, like you and like all of us, we all have stories, and that's what all my books are. That's what all my keynotes are. They're stories. Both personally and about the athletes and coaches and broadcasters that I worked with, that I think are probably a story that connects with so many people in the world, because we all have, our own stories.
Yeah, the Energy Clock is fascinating, and I hope people will read that, because you're talking about energy buckets and kind of putting yourself into different categories. But I want to ask you about one of your other books, because I think this is an interesting one, A Winner's Guide to Negotiating. All right. And you told the story. This probably all started, Molly, when you were a tennis coach and you were trying to, negotiate with your apartment complex or whatever. But most people, I think, are scared to death to sit across from somebody and represent themselves. Would you agree with that? And if so, why? Do they not understand their value, or they're too nervous?
Well, I think people are afraid to change the relationship. I think people are afraid that they might offend somebody. I think they're afraid that if they ask for what they want, that the relationship could be strained or go away. There's a myriad of reasons. I think, but I would say too, there's a gender component, right? I mean, the data shows, right, men compare negotiation to going to a football game, right? And women compare it to going to the dentist. And so, it is but I believe it's an incredibly important thing to learn how to do. I think that we miss every day, lots of times throughout the day, opportunities to negotiate. I think they're all around us. I think it's, people often think of negotiation as money. I think it's about negotiating where you spend your time, where you spend your energy. It's negotiating little things all day long. And I would argue that it's all day, every day, all around us. And that if we start to recognize and practice in the little moments, right? Like maybe it's begging the barista at Starbucks to throw a free shot of vanilla, in your coffee and waive the 25-cent charge, right?
Do you do that?
Start to have fun with it. Just for fun sometimes. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
all right, just want to make sure.
But I think the way that, what I always try to sort of, share is that, gosh, if we can practice in the little moments in our lives, those are all the things that help us practice when we've got to renew a big vendor contract, or when we've got to negotiate a comp package for ourselves, or even sometimes with our darn kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the little moments in our lives prepare us, I think, for often the big moments. And for me personally, I lived in a world where I negotiated every day, all day long, for my clients mostly. And what I found when I kind of got out into the sort of the real world, if you will, the business world, I found that, man, people don't see it like an everyday thing. And that it's such a powerful thing, though, if you can lean into these moments. And I've always believed that the stronger the relationship, the better the outcome. And so we actually, about 2 years ago, I launched Game Changer Negotiation Training. It's a one-day training program where we go into organizations and we deliver this training. And I launched it because what I realized is, gosh, all these tools and tactics that I learned for almost 20 years as an agent, and these are obviously transferable, and that in a world where people think that the relationships are supposed to be, get on the opposite side of the table, take your gloves off and go at each other, right? That's what people think of, I think, when they think about sports agents in the sports space. But what I found was the opposite, right? That the stronger my relationship was with the network executive or the general manager or, the athletic director or the rep, the better the deal. And in fact, the better the relationship, the quicker I could close the deal, and I could close a better deal. So what we teach people how to do is, how can you be intentional about knowing how you show up at the negotiation table? How is the person that you're negotiating with show up? I think one of the mistakes people make is they spend a lot of time worried about what they want, and not enough time in the head and the heart of the person you're negotiating with.
Yeah.
And all of that drives connection. And the stronger the connection, the quicker and better the deal.
So we both do workshops, and I know there are so many people that do workshops like we do. And I always think, all right, I don't want mine to be like that. I don't want mine to be like that. I don't want it to be like that. Mine's got to somehow be completely different from what anybody else offers. And that's how I try to choreograph the whole thing. So you just talked about the people on the other side of you in negotiation. What's most important for the people on the other side of you? In other words, what is the main thing that Molly Fletcher tries to get across to everybody sitting on the opposite side in a workshop?
In a workshop, right? So, and I have coaches that deliver our programs all over the world. So I actually don't deliver that many of them, although I do some virtually now. But the most important thing is obviously, it's a ton of things, right? It's an 8-hour one-day program, and there's a ton of things that extend from that day. But I think that you've got to make it personal. You've got to make it real, right? I mean, if it becomes personal to them. So a lot of times we have a case study in our workshop that we customize that case study for people. So it's about the work that they do. It's about the business that they're in. It's about the kind of deals that show up in their own lives. So when we know in life and adult learning that the more personal we make it, the more of that content and that behavior is changed and absorbed. So we make it personal, and they practice. We have no PowerPoint at all in our workshop. People are up, they're moving around from the beginning of the day, and they're practicing, and they're practicing in groups of 2 in pairs. They're practicing in groups of 4. When we do it virtually, we break out into breakout rooms in Zoom of 2, of groups of 4. But the most important thing is that it's personal, and they practice, and it's dynamic. I think one of the biggest feedbacks we get is that there's absolutely no PowerPoint, right? It's not a death by there's not one thing. We need no screens, right?
Sure,
I mean, it is
boom.
They're rolling up their sleeves out of the gates and getting it done. And they leave having actually worked on deals that they're inside of right now. So they're getting work done that's real and
instant
relevant
toolbox.
Exactly. And so that's incredibly powerful too, because not only are they learning and practicing, but they're actually getting some work done along the way as well.
In addition to hosting this podcast, Kraig leads the Kann Advisory Group, focused on elevating communication for companies and individuals. Company consulting, empowering team and individual workshops, mind-altering webinars, and Kraig's inspiring keynotes for your conference or company meeting. They're all on the menu of services. Kann Advisory helps companies clarify their message, helps professionals build and showcase their brand, and helps everyone present their best selves. So if you're the leader of a team or company looking to give your employees a game-changing one-day experience, or an individual who wants to become a speaker and presenter that gets other people talking, visit cannadvisory.com. And when you do connect, make sure to mention the Tracks to Success podcast to receive a special discount on any of the Kann Advisory services. That's cannadvisory.com. Now back to the interview.
A couple of questions before I let you go. Tied to speaking, which is now something that you do all the time. And by the way, I got another Starbucks question, which will be my last. So hang tight for your negotiation with the Starbucks person. All right, let's talk about speaking in public. Now, you got to know this because you talked about, how you had a couple when you first started and all that. And I want to ask you about your nervousness, because that's what I coach. I've seen you in action. You're amazing, and you do connect. But the number one fear among all Americans is public speaking. And number two is death, by the way, which to me is completely laughable because it basically says, right, that people would rather be buried 6 feet underground than be up on the top of the ground talking about the life they just lived. So whatever. Were you nervous when you got on that stage at the very beginning?
Sure. Oh yeah, no question. I was. I mean, I remember I was in San Diego speaking to a group of about 500 financial advisors. Actually, I think it was from UBS. And I remember, what I did that day and what I do now is different, right? And like all of us in life, we evolve. And I think that day I was behind a podium, you know what I mean? I was leaning on my PowerPoint quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm never behind a podium. My slides are very, very minimal, if any at all, right? I think that if my slide deck doesn't work, it doesn't change the day at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it's different. But like everything in life, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. And I'm sure that's what you teach, right? Is if you can get people practicing and leaning into it a little bit. So yes, I was so nervous out of the gates, and now I don't get nervous, but it's just because I just did it a lot and practiced a lot. And I think that's probably relevant to everybody in the world. If everybody has gifts and things that they do, and I'd be pretty nervous if somebody threw a camera on me like you did day after day, year after year, interviewing some of the best golfers in the world. But once you did it and got good at it and kept doing it, you didn't get nervous anymore.
Yeah, it goes away. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this podcast is called Tracks to Success. All right. And we all need influencers. We all need people who've helped us along the way. What's one piece of advice that you could give to anybody trying to break into the business of maybe being an agent or being an entrepreneur? What would you tell them?
Wow. I mean, I think I would say, one is just be incredibly curious. One of the things that in my podcast, like you, I get to interview different people and learn from them. And one of the things that I consistently hear from great leaders, great athletes, great authors, et cetera, is they're very curious people. And when I say curious, I mean curious about, the opportunities that exist out there, but also they're curious about their own gaps. So as an entrepreneur, I try to be really aware of my blind spots, and I try to create an environment with my team that's really, really safe for them to speak to those, to close those for me, and to help me see my own gaps so that I can become a better leader, and create an environment where it's really safe for them to give me really difficult feedback, and for all of us to give each other tough feedback. To me, a lot of times I think people think in teams that, these difficult conversations should be avoided. I think you got to lean into those. I mean, that's when we grow. That's when we get better. So, the team component, the leadership component, I mean, I read leadership books, team books constantly so that I can show up and serve the people that my small team, hopefully the very best I can. And I think for all of us, when we do that, we show up better.
Okay, before we go, take us into Starbucks and help us, take us through how you get the lady or the man there to give us that extra shot of flavor in the coffee for free. What do you do?
Oh man. Well, I mean, some of these stories I probably shouldn't admit to, right? But some of them are just for fun, and we're talking
Right.
about 25 cents. And
Yeah.
trust me, I think Howard Schultz and Starbucks are doing fine. But you place your order, right? And you pay for your order, and then you get over to the barista side, and these guys care a little bit less. And so you get your cart. Now, Starbucks is a pretty easy one too, by the way, right? Like they're pretty chill, right? Like if they make your wrong coffee, they just dump it out and make you a new one, no problem. But you lean over to the barista, with a little bit of a smile, and you just sort of, hey man, I kind of forgot to ask, but do you mind if you can just throw a little pump of vanilla in there for me? That'd be awesome. And, they kind of look at you, and they sort of, sometimes they'll say, well, normally we're supposed to charge 25 cents, but for today, no problem. And I'm like, dude, for today, I've done this 25 times. So there's been 25 for today's, but thank you. So I should probably not admit those. My favorite negotiation story, though, I'll tell you that's sort of more real life that I went.
It's got to be your daughters.
It is, exactly. So I take my daughters in to get their braces, and parents that are listening know this, right? Like, so now it's a racket. You run this first phase of braces, and then 3 years later you get to do it all over again for the same pile of money. And so I go in, and they say, of course they do the exam on all three of my girls, because we had 3 kids in 12 months, which is another story. But so, they're 6, 6, and 7, and we go in there, and they're, mouths like landmines. And of course the docs are, they all need braces. I'm like, yeah, that's shocking, right? I would have never guessed you would have said that. And so then he says, go back and talk to our manager, Renee, and she'll walk you through kind of how this works. And so we sit down, and she's like, well, look, here's the deal. You do phase 1, and they'll stay on for a year or 2. And then you do, take a little break, and then we do phase 2, and then they get the retainer and all this stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I didn't do this. My brothers didn't do this. This is new.
Yeah.
And she goes, so it's $3,000 for each girl. And you can do, payments over time and over this 2-year window of time. And then, we take a break, and then whatever. And I go, God. And it was in a great location, this orthodontist office, and it was packed. The waiting room was packed. I mean, it was full. And I thought, man, I said, so like you do this for everybody? Like you have, you invoice all these people and every month? And she goes, yeah. And I go, like, does everybody always pay on time? And she goes, well, no. And I go, that's got to be a kind of a nightmare. And she goes, oh, it's exhausting. So we have these people, and it's not like you could just rip their braces off if they don't pay. And she goes, oh yeah, it's, and I said, man, and she just, I just invoiced them. And I just looked right at her, and I go, well, what if we do this? I said, what if I just write you a check right now for $6,000, kind of a buy 2, get 1 free kind of deal, right? And we can be done with this, and you don't have to invoice me, and I don't have to cause that racket. And she just sort of looked at me and goes, what? I said, yeah, like I'll just write you a check, $6,000. We can be done. You don't have to invoice me. We can get the break, And she goes, well, I got to go ask the docs if we can do that, And she walks back and comes back like 2 minutes later, and boom, I had the buy 2, get 1 free model. So
love it.
I always say, people think that, you're not supposed to maybe negotiate in moments like that. But like I said earlier, I think it's everywhere if we can lean into it.
You are an incredible influencer to me, and I know you know that because I've told you that. Before we go, how can people buy your book, The Energy Clock? Where can they find a way to bring you to their stage to speak?
You're sweet, Kraig. So all my books are on Amazon under Molly Fletcher, of course, and wherever books are sold, obviously in physical bookstores too. And then mollyfletcher.com is where kind of all my stuff is, and you can navigate to the Game Changer negotiation training workshops from there as well. So thanks for having me on, Kraig. It's great to always hear your voice.
Appreciate it very much. I am calling the orthodontist that did my 3 kids now that we're done, and I'm venturing off to Starbucks. Have a wonderful day. I really appreciate you being on with me. Take care.
It's a pleasure.
In our conversation, Molly shared stories about managing energy and prioritizing what's important, which leads me to my one last thing. If you want to be an influencer, be your own agent. Focus your time on things that help you get where you want to go, not things that really serve no purpose or leave you stuck in the place that leads to nowhere. Learn to negotiate on your own behalf, standing proud for the value you bring to the table and the way it will help others. Be accountable to your own brand. Treat yourself like a CEO and focus on YOU with thoughts about who you can impact, how you'll do it, and where it can all take you. Do that, your tracks to success become a whole lot easier. If you have an inspiring guest who belongs on Tracks to Success, go ahead and message me on Twitter using @TracksToSuccess. Until next time, I'm Kraig Kann. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Tracks to Success, brought to you by Presentation Partners, visual storytellers passionate about connecting presenters with their audience. Don't forget to subscribe to the show for more great interviews and thoughts on reaching your highest personal and professional summit. You can follow Kraig on Twitter and Instagram using the handle @Kraig Kann. And for exclusive Tracks to Success content and news about our upcoming guests, you can find Tracks to Success on Twitter. It's @Tracks to Success.